Hello. Oh, wait, hold on. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day this finds you. Welcome to Tabletop Tabletalk. The focus of what I want to do here is I want to either A, give people the tools they feel like they need so that they can run a game and be a GM, because we always need more. Especially, we need more variety and diversity in that sense. Two, if you have run games, try to give you new things that you can use for your games, new tools, new ideas, new things to consider. Because one of the best things about telling stories is that there's always new ways to do it. So if I can help you do that in any way, then that's exactly what I want and aspire to do. So today I wanted to talk about three things in particular. I wanted to talk about tone, I wanted to talk about context, and I wanted to talk about dynamic. We are in a time when playing games online is both, I don't know if easier is the right word, it's more available, I'd say. And because it's more available, we have more people that can tell these stories through different mediums. That doesn't make it any less terrifying. And with a bigger reach, with more potential for new people to play with, it does make it a little more terrifying when you're playing and getting to know and create stories with new people. So, something that I personally want to do and try to do more is talk about tone whenever I'm going to play with them. If I've played with someone for literally years, or I've played with someone for only a day, or if I've never played with someone, establishing that tone between me and my party is something that I especially want to do. So, before we go into the tone, what do you think a GM is? And this is not like a loaded question. Is this the person who is guiding the story? Is this the person who is helping to narrate the story? Is this the person who is just filling in the blanks of the story? What do you want to be when you are running a session for people? I'm not the perfect GM, and I don't think that it's plausible to be a perfect GM. I can be the perfect GM for individual people because perfection is, in a lot of ways, pretty relative. I can be the perfect person for individual groups, and the same goes for you. There's a pressure and concern to find a sort of perfection that is universal. And we see other people doing that. And we see what may feel like them doing the perfect job, but it could just be it's the perfect job for the people who are watching and the people who are playing. And for the people watching, it might not be the perfect job, and that's okay. I do like the term facilitator because you can be a GM that's a facilitator that's just guiding what happens. Something you'll hear me say is whenever I'm speaking, I try to change the word player to party. I try to change player to party because if I'm talking about being a GM, I like feeling like I'm still a player. I want the person running a story for me to still feel like they're a player in this story. And the party that's going through the story can be a separate thing. But it doesn't mean the person facilitating, the person running, the person guiding the story isn't still a player in this world, in these worlds that we create, because it's we doing it together. It's a collaboration, it's a collaborative experience. And GM can mean literally anything you want it to. GM, if you wanted to stick to the two letters, you could literally be the general maestro. You can be the game master. You can make up another title. Sometimes I call myself the Dreadlord, pun entirely intended. I did that for a campaign where I was playing basically a murder mystery mansion. And it was fun. It was fun facilitating that little bit of worry or concern about what's happening next. And I feel like that's a good transition to the first topic, into the topic of tone. Session tone is literally that, literally setting the tone for the session or even the campaign. A lot of people will compare this to a session zero. They'll talk about safety tools, which are incredibly important no matter where you are, what game you're doing. Safety tools are incredibly important. And we're going to have a whole episode about that. And there are a couple people that I'm very excited to talk to about, but we will get into that. When you're talking to the party that you have, ask the questions: how much combat do you want? How big of like a focus is humor in this game? How much narrative, how much storytelling do you want? How much of an open experience do you want? Are you looking for more of a sandbox, or do you have a specific story you want to tell and follow? And these can vary a lot depending if you're doing one shots or campaigns. But when you ask that question, you open up the conversation because they might not have even considered it. Or they might have an intense idea in their head of what they want and just didn't have the moment to air it. And as the GM, you're also allowed to have these feelings. You're allowed to want these questions answered, and you're allowed to have your own answers to these questions. If I'm coming up with a one shot, I might literally say there's going to be very little combat in this one shot. Um, I might want a bit more humor because I want it to be lighthearted and fun. There's going to be a decent bit of narrative, but you're absolutely welcome to come up with any other extra aspects that you want. For an open experience, this probably won't be very open. It's probably going to be more of a railroaded story, like we're following a specific adventure. And literally, that communication can change the way players build their characters. Because if a player builds a character focused entirely on combat and didn't have that moment of communication ahead of time, knowing that there wouldn't be much, it can be frustrating. If they create this character in the party who deals out damage with ease, like it's entirely just something so natural, and the entire campaign or session that they're running through takes place in a tavern during a drinking contest. It doesn't mean they can't still have fun, but it is a change of mindset that when you communicate that earlier, when you have that conversation, it gives people the opportunity to create something that they might enjoy more. Because that's why we play games. We play games to have fun together. We play games to tell stories and create like intriguing and exciting moments together. When I give my party that notion, when they have an idea of going forward, or if I say this will be a very combat heavy situation, we are going to be doing a dungeon crawl. You are going to be going through a cyberpunk city where there are bandits and cyborg killer androids everywhere trying to take people out. They can get a better idea of what character they want to be in this world. If they make a character that is entirely focused on quips, jokes, and not really dealing much damage or being built for attack, that's absolutely fantastic because they know going forward what this character is going to be involved in. And I don't think that it comes out of malintent when people don't set tone. I think it comes from wanting to have secrets or surprises or keep things unknown and surprising. That's not bad. It's just not as necessary as I feel like there's an air to. If I have 30 secrets and I tell my players half of them just so they have an idea of what to work with, I still have 15 secrets. Or if I tell them 9 secrets, but I keep that one really big one to myself, those 9 secrets that they learned, they can work with, they can build off of. And it sets the tone for what they want to do and what I want to see and what I want to build for this party. And then we can build it together. A lot of the time when I speak, I say the word you, and I'm speaking of the overall you. What is it that you would want your players, your party, your characters, your world, your experience to be? When was the last time you ran a session or campaign that had combat involved and someone had asked you or you knew beforehand how involved combat was actively like going to be? There's often times when it's flexible because when you're running a session, you might not have an idea of what your party is going to do. They may walk into the bar and start a bar fight that leads to a bar brawl that leads to the tavern being burned down immediately. And you can't really control that. But you may have circumstances where this predetermined robbery was going to happen. This predetermined gigantic beast is going to burst out of the ground and crack a hole in the earth. And out of that hole in the earth, a dozen swarming skeletons arise out. But if your party is built for communication and diplomacy and they aren't prepared for something like that, it can be a little confusing. It might set a different tone than they were prepared for. And the reason I talk about this being for both the GM and the party is because it might not be your style of game to run either. You might be someone who genuinely just wants to build a narrative and then expand on that. And again, that's more than okay. If you want to build a 12 layered woven story of intrigue, confusion, disguise, and deceit, and there's so many different people that your party has to talk to, that your characters interact with, that your characters get to know and your characters get involved with, that's fantastic. If you're not the type of GM who wants to run heavy, intense combat, if you want to run something that's potentially more fluid or short lived, if you want to run something that doesn't necessarily take maybe half a session, there are people that do. You don't have to be that person. And you can tell your party beforehand. My style is more of I try to focus on diplomacy rather than combat if I can help it. I don't really want as much like humor through everything. I would like there to be some of the heavy moments because I do want to explore this sort of theme. Is that okay with everyone? Is everyone comfortable with that? Can we do that? Because you're building a sense of trust. These people are trusting you when you tell this story. They are trusting you with the characters they create, and they are trusting you with the narrative you're going to build together. And I will say together over and over and over and over and over again. Because I am not a fan of the player versus GM ideology. I've played against GMs. I've played against DMs, not wanting to. And it wasn't fun for me. That can be something that if people want, they can do. But there have been circumstances where I had to fight to get information, or I had to fight to understand what was going to happen next, or I wanted to start from a small template and build up, and it wasn't enough. I was told that I needed more to be delved into the story, or else it just wouldn't fit. And that made me realize the tone for this session, the tone for this group, the tone for this party, the tone with these players wasn't the tone that I wanted. That's why setting tone is so important. Because when you set that tone, it's for your comfort and theirs. It's not about one person's feelings being more important than the others. A big part of games is compromise and working, you guessed it, together. So the next one I wanted to talk about is context. Context for your party. How much context do you want to give? This is related to session tone because even if you want them to entirely do whatever like you or they want, sometimes they need context because we all forget things. When I run games and sessions, I can be forgetful because there is so much information to keep track of. And I will take notes, but even sometimes as I'm running this experience, I can't take notes on everything. And if they do things outside of what I expected, my notes are going to be a bit off. I had notes for what happened when they went to the tavern and talked to Jared. I did not have notes for what happened when they decided to smooch Miss Elaine and then decide to go visit what may or may not be a dragon farm. Context can relate to secrets. Having character secrets is a great narrative story building tool. I recommend talking to your party about secrets they want to have and finding a good middle ground where the secrets they want to have can be secrets from the rest of the party and don't necessarily have to be secrets from the GM. Because as I said about trust, it's trusting you to keep that secret from the rest of the party, trusting you to help build on that secret until the specific player is ready to reveal that, ready to bring it up, ready to talk about it, ready to discuss that. I like having secrets for my characters. I really do. I like having an extra aspect that when it comes up, there's that shock of surprise, there's that intrigue, there's that excitement. I love those moments, actually. And when I have a secret with the GM, they give me opportunities to hint at the secret when I want to. We're working together to build that moment. It's like having an inside joke that you're really excited to share with everyone else. And when someone shares with you, when you have two people who are loving something and then they get that moment to share with you their excitement and you see how it all comes together, that moment is irreplaceable. So if you can motivate your party to share things with you, to trust in you, to trust that you want to build that moment with them, imagine how exciting it will be when you see it come to fruition. There's also moments when my players, or when I'm, huh, vernacular is hard to switch. There's also moments when my party feels like they need to keep secrets from me because they want me to be shocked. And that's, I think, entirely okay. It's something that I've learned how to work with because there's a difference between a party member keeping a secret because they want to surprise you and a difference between a party member keeping a secret because they don't know if they can trust you with the secret. I can think of at least twice when I wanted to include something in my backstory for a character and I didn't because I did not know how it was going to be managed. And I didn't want to bring it up because I wasn't comfortable enough to do it. There have been times when I had things that were secrets that I shared with the GM. And even if it was just a one shot that I wanted to bring up at a specific moment, I lost that agency. And it's frustrating. And finding a way to balance that out so that they're comfortable enough to have those secrets for their characters, it's sometimes a thin line. I really support sharing secrets amongst all players, party and GM, if you can be comfortable and trust. If you can build that trust with the rest of the party, if you can give them circumstances to be more comfortable with each other, when they share those secrets amongst each other, they can start to separate player reaction versus in character reaction, which is something as a GM I have to do pretty often. Because if I know that the character Elaine is cursed by a dragon in some way, but I have Elaine interacting with all of these different characters, they don't know that. I can't have them react to Elaine's draconic curse. But Gabe knows. Gabe remembers. Maybe there is a character that could react to that. Maybe I talk to that specific party member about how someone would react to it. Because getting the character's consent, getting the player's consent about what to do when it comes to a character they made is pretty necessary. It's a story they made and they're giving you the ability to use. Because when you're a GM, I really don't think it's just your world, it's our world. That's a point that I really try to emphasize. The context that it is our world. It's not just mine. I had a foundation that I built up, and I love the foundation that I've been able to build. So what can we do to build on top of that? What context can you give me that I can add to this world so we can expand on it? What context can you give me so that we can make this world even more alive? Get the context from your party about how in depth they want to go. Is there a thing as too much information? I honestly have to say that it varies. For some, 2 pages of backstory is what they want. For some, yeah, exactly. Our game, our story, our world. But when you're when you have those 2 pages of backstory, is it what you're seeking? Is it too much? Is it too little? Give your players a bit of context about what idea you have for this world. Do you have pre-established areas, pre-established names, pre-established figures, pre-established homes? Or do you have a general map and you want to just build on top of it? Do you want your party to come in with a backstory about where they were, how they grew up, what their family was like? Or do you want them to come in with who their character is and then build on top of that? Or is it a combination? Personally, I like when players have a fairly loose backstory because a lot of my GM style is building a world for the party, and the world doesn't have everything defined already. I have location ideas that may be loose. I'll come up with spontaneous locations as we play and go further and further in the story. And it's so incredibly exciting seeing the things that they come up with. During my session zeros, I'll often talk, is there a place that you would like to see in this world? One time I was given a forest that was literally filled with the ghosts of animals that had lived there previously. And it was a thought I had never even considered. And because we built that up together, we went in depth as we wanted to. We hadn't delved into specifically what creatures were there. We hadn't delved into a specific figure that lived there. We hadn't even delved into why that forest existed. But they just loved the idea, and I'm like, yes, I love it. Let's put it together. Let's make it happen. Let's see what that looks like when we get there. And we set the foundation for it. And the more and more we played, we hadn't even delved into it for I think the first month that we really played together. But then they started to ask questions to other people in other places that made me start to think of it. There was a rumor that there was a magical, mystical beast that dwelled in some forest nearby. And I remembered we built one previously. And I even asked that player, do you mind if I just take this idea? You mind if I just take this idea that we talked about a month ago and then just delve into it with something that I have in mind? Absolutely, do it, rock out. Because it's also checking when they give you that. Do they still have an idea? Do they have something they wanted to build onto it? Do they want more for that, or did they just like the idea and they wanted to give you the chance to run with it? And I'd argue that chances are, when you're given context of an idea, when you're given an idea, the players will want you to run with it. The party wants to see what you come up with. And if they have an idea, all you have to do is ask. Asking is not losing anything. You literally only have to gain from asking them what else they would like to see. It's okay to have preferences with what you want to build for a story. It's okay if you decide what works out better for you is having 3 paragraphs of notes when you start. Because I have days like that. The last one shot that I ran, I had literally 3 paragraphs of a general story outline because I had no idea what was going to happen, what the players wanted to see. And we had talked a little bit about it, but there was still so much more. And there wasn't really preferences for it. Half of the time, I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know what an NPC looks like until people ask. It's like the idea when you're watching an anime and there are the main characters and there are the background side characters that don't even have all of their features built. They don't have the features until they become important. And then when they're important, it all comes together. And my brain is spontaneously just gunning through it, trying to figure it out. So, the third thing that I wanted to talk about before we get into more of a flexible conversation is dynamic. We want groups to work together and work well together, and not everyone will. Your best friends from college might get along in one circumstance, but whether or not they can be an adventuring party is entirely different. I played a tabletop session years ago with um, my oldest sister, the youngest of my sisters, one of my brother-in-law, actually two of my brother-in-laws, and in generally like they get along fairly well. When they were an adventuring party, they did butt heads fairly often. I remember one of them found a mythical creature that had spoken to him, and he decided he was going to kill it immediately. The rest of the family was not super happy about that. And even though they get along great, just going about the day, hanging out, chilling, talking, watching TV, it does not mean they are the ideal adventuring party. And finding that balance for your party is a challenge. I'm not going to be the first person to say it's just a game. Some days it's just silly. It is. And I feel that and understand that and relate to that a lot. I'm not going to be the one to say someone takes it too seriously when they get involved in fantasy world because fantasy is one of the greatest escapes in my opinion. I love delving into fantasy worlds and seeing what they have. I love getting involved in fantasy worlds. It's why we can cry and get emotional at movies or TV shows. Even if the characters aren't real, it doesn't make the emotions less real. So when you're running for a group, what is the dynamic going to be? Setting up and understanding that dynamic is why the earlier point of session tone is so important. You might have an adventuring party that is fantastic when it comes to knocking through a dungeon, defeating enemies, and saving the person at the end. You might have a dynamic group where half of them are very goal oriented, and the other half may specifically want to see why that sheep is green. Nothing else matters. There might be a moon that's falling down from the sky, but that green sheep though. And it's not even bad, but it doesn't always work out well. Have you ever had a dynamic for a party that you were in or that you were running for that there was a little bit of a split? And the question is, how do you manage it? Sometimes some players will have less of an investment. And I'll keep also saying that's okay because I feel like we don't acknowledge not being the same level as other people is okay. not being the same level of invested, not being the same level of understanding, the same level of comprehension of just sometimes fantasy, sci-fi, cyberpunk, Victorian Gothic, any of those things. Not having the same level of just snap judgment and understanding is totally okay. Because even if you don't have the same level of investment, you can still have just as much fun. So decide what dynamic you're looking for when you're running for this group. And if they have different dynamics, where do they meet? This group that is very invested in that green sheep. This group that is very invested in finding out how this all ties together, how to get to the bottom of the situation. If you just have an open-ended circumstance, blend them together. That player that keeps asking about that green sheep, indulge them. Indulge them and take them to that sheep. Even though the other party members want to go to the blacksmith who is rumored to have had a mystical weapon of some sort. Go talk to that green sheep and make a twist. Maybe the sheep is awakened and they saw something. So the sheep speaks. It gives that silly moment of validation to that one character that was so invested in it. And now, after having that investment, you're veering them back to sync up with the other characters. The green sheep that had literally no circumstance, you build into the story. You turn it into the story. And then slide it forward even further. If the dynamic doesn't always fit, how do you blend it? What are some tips and tricks that you would do for it? Personally, like I said, I will redirect people. I'll give them that exciting moment they wanted that was related to something entirely ridiculous and then get them more on track with everyone else. It gives them that validation, that satisfaction, that excitement. And when people feel validated, feel satisfied, it's easier for them to be more involved with something else that is less their focus. I just wanted to press that button. And now that I pressed the button, we can do anything else that you wanted to do. But until I pressed the button, I was not going to be satisfied. It's a very common experience. As a character and a GM, that happens to me a lot. When my party comes across very strange things that are obviously not traps per se, but lures for me. What is a good circumstance? I had a party dynamic where they wanted to go into a dungeon, but there was one player who wanted to go back and romance someone back at a tavern. And the dynamic of the two just kept batting. And I didn't want it to be an issue. So what I did was I sent the person they wanted to romance into the dungeon. And they weren't in danger. I had said that they were a retired adventurer who went in there to explore themselves. But immediately that player was like, "Oh, oh no. Oh, we should go. We should have been to the dungeon already." And it made the two like characters' goals align. They wanted to explore the dungeon now, but now they had an even more purpose to explore the dungeon. And the characters who went to explore the dungeon to begin with were like, "Oh, actually now there's someone that we actually have to care for in the dungeon. There's a purpose, there's a drive. We wanted to explore just from curiosity, but now something is happening here. What can we do to resolve this? How can we fix this? How can we make it better?" So I guess a big a big focus of this talk today is about communication. Communication is key, and it is also something that feels simultaneously easy and difficult. I am a very nervous GM sometimes. And for a long time, I had to convince myself that I could tell fantastic stories. And in the most modest way I can say possible, I realized I can tell fantastic stories because a fantastic story doesn't have to be fantastic for everyone. It just has to be fantastic for the people in front of me. If I'm doing a stream show, I hope that other people who watch me enjoy it. But who I really want to enjoy it is the party that's right in front of me because they're the ones that are experiencing it firsthand. I want them to be able to talk to me because I want them to be able to feel like they can have their secrets, but they don't need them to be secrets for the game to be enjoyed. I want them to be able to trust that when they tell me these secrets will stay with me and they will be revealed when that character wants to reveal them. Or being able to communicate and ask that question, is it okay if this happens in this moment? Absolutely. That'd be great. That communication gives me as a GM 10 times more options. I had a situation where a character, um, a character's mentor was going to make an attempt to protect the player character. And I specifically asked that player at the table, is this okay? And it was a private conversation. I sent a message to them through a whisper. I had asked them, is it okay if your mentor passes away in this moment to protect you? Because it was a character that they had built. They had given me the concept of. They had added into their backstory. And it was a character that they were involved. They were invested. They were the reason that NPC existed. And just from asking the player character, like the player, they were like, yeah, that'd be intense. That'd be amazing. And that extra moment of communication did a couple things. One, it made them mentally prepared for what was happening next. Because I do enjoy shock and awe in certain circumstances. But if something can cause grief, I don't prefer that, especially if it's something that you're invested in. Asking them and getting that confirmation from them, they were mentally prepared and okay with that happening. And when you're running a story for character, like for players, for a party, you never know how they will react to a character for sure. You can have a great idea, a great estimation of their excitement. But when you create a character, it could remind them of anyone. And if they create characters, as the GM, just remember there could be dozens of reasons they created these characters. If a party member creates a character that reminds them of their parent, and without realizing, without having that notion, and it was a character that the party member made because they wanted for their backstory, and you as a GM decide a dramatic moment here would be great to see it happen. If that like character who reminds them of their parent passes away indirectly, you will be making that happen. It's why trust is so important. When a party member or when you have a party who is playing a game with you, it feels like it's a lot of responsibility sometimes. And there is responsibility, but in a two-way street. It is trust. They are trusting you with their characters, and they are trusting you with an experience. They are trusting a sense of flexibility that I hope you agree on beforehand. They are trusting you to guide this experience. And just from asking that that member of the party if I could have this tragic moment with the like NPC they created and getting that confirmation from them, absolutely. That makes sense. I feel like it would be a great moment for the character. I appreciate that you asked. It's reinforcing that trust. It's reinforcing that understanding, and it's reinforcing that even if something is going to happen, they can trust you to communicate and talk with them. They can trust you to give context of what's going to happen. They can trust you with the tone of what happens next. They can trust you to respect and build and improve on this dynamic that you have with them. And the moment was beautiful. I was so proud. The party member was able to come up with actually like a little monologue they wanted for that moment because they knew it was happening. And if they had said no, if they had said no, I'd really rather nothing bad happens to them. Nothing bad happens to that NPC. Like it's okay for your party members to have a big influence on this world because it's our world. And when they had that no, when they knew that even when this character is introduced here, there's not going to be a tragic moment that happens, it also reduces a sense of worry and concern. Because when you have, as a member of the party or as the GM, when you have someone show up unexpectedly in a dangerous situation, especially if you're a party member, and it's an NPC that you really like or that you are really invested in, there's a little bit of concern of, are they going to die? And to be clear, this is not saying when you're creating NPCs, you have to always ask the party if it's okay for you to kill that NPC. Whether narratively, a predetermined thing to happen, or a spontaneous turn of combat. It's saying when people have a genuine investment and something they put a lot of work and time and effort into, having that conversation doesn't take away from the moment. It might change what the moment could be, but it doesn't take away from potential of what happens next. I think that's like wildly important. I've had so many fantastic conversations just from moments like that. And if you ask your party to come up with ideas beforehand, you could literally ask when you're setting the tone, are there any of these characters that you specifically don't want anything bad to happen to? If they have an idea for a character that is a sweet bakery shop elf who every time the party goes to visit them has an extra pie. So it's just something nice extra to throw into the story. And that's someone they specifically just want to have there because it's comforting. It's it's like having a save point that you can go back to. It's comfort. It's compassion. It's understanding. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of being a GM. Grasping the communication and then finding the dynamic that works for all players, as well as the party and the GM together. And my dynamics for my groups are different in pretty much all of them. Whether I'm a party member, whether I'm GM, even if I'm GM for a couple different things, the dynamic is always a bit different. So yeah, you said one of my players have missing parents for her character, and I straight up asked her, "Do you want them to be alive? Do you want them to be dead? Do you want them to be baddies?" Based on her answers, I figured out what would happen to them. That's fantastic because when they give you that information, or they could literally tell you, "I actually don't have a preference," and that's telling you, okay, that means that I can work with it. You're not taking away any agency from them at all. You're giving them an opportunity to build on what they have. That's a big part of why, as well, that I like open ended stories when I work with my party. When I have a character who comes in and they are the firstborn prince of a forsaken king that has been lost to the ages and was poisoned. And this prince is seeking to reclaim his kingdom from his accursed uncle who had poisoned his father after being backstabbed in a war against elves of the sea, and then betrayed by the giants of the sea that allied with the elves because they wanted the kingdom. It's a dope as heck backstory. Without knowing the tone of what the party wants, and without having a better idea of what the GM has in mind, it might be overwhelming. If you come to the table with 4 pages, or your players come to the table with 4 pages, and you have pages, and everyone has a bunch of backstory that doesn't come together, it can be a challenge. And so, if we loop back to tone a little bit, when you set the tone of the world that you want to build with this group, you, I hope, know you're allowed to say, can we have something more open ended? Are we able to change this to fit into this idea that I have? And you can have that conversation. You are not doing anything wrong for wanting a bit more wiggle room to work with an idea you have. There is a difference between asking if you can do something and telling someone what is going to happen. So if you ask and have that conversation, the party member may literally say, "Oh, I actually it was just a random idea that I had, but I'm okay with this changing to this, actually. Oh, there's not really rivers? Huh. Well, could we do this? Oh, we're playing in the desert. Well, what about this?" That's been a really big learning curve for me. I don't want anyone that I'm playing with to feel like I'm asking them to change exactly what they want. It's a big concern for me. I never want them to feel obligated to have to do that. I like when they're open to interpretation because I don't want to have conflict about what they want. And if that's all they want, and then they still decide they want to be a party member in this game, I don't want them to resent they're not getting the story they want to tell. That's why dynamic is important. And something that's hard to say, not every player at a table may be made for that table. Or not every player at a table may actually want to be at that table, but they just chose to be. This is part of why I wanted to do this show. So there are plenty of people in the chat, and you don't actually have to type out an answer to me, but I just want to ask you a question. Have you ever run a tabletop game? Like a tabletop game where there was a GM, or even if you're not playing a GM, even if you're playing a game that is a GM-less system, Have you ever been the facilitator for a game like that? And there are a bunch of you that can say yes, and I'm glad. I can think of at least 6 people that I know that haven't. Jess. There's plenty of people. So then the next question. On one hand, can you count how many different times you have run a tabletop game? On two hands, can you count how many times you have run a tabletop game? Because less than 10 is still not a bad number to preface, but it's not a lot. If you consider how many times you have been a member of a party or you've just been a player in a GM-less game, how does it compare to how many times you have run a game? Is it a 1 in 5? Is it a 1 in 10? Is it a 1 in 100? Now think about how many people you know that have never run a game. Well, so that's also a good point. Forever GMs unite. The reason people end up being forever GMs often is because other people don't feel like they can run these games. They don't feel like they have the ability, they don't feel like they can meet the standard, they don't feel good enough to do it. And there needs to be a want to do it. That's true. I know plenty of people though that want to and don't feel like they're good enough to. I would say anyone is good enough to run a tabletop game. It may take some time, it may take some learning, it may take some practice. It may take being a party member first before you run the game. But anyone can do it. Yes, I will continue to call you out. And when you're running games, also, especially for anyone who GMs often or not, it's okay to want validation for the stuff that you've done. See, so that's awesome. You're training to take over for your party's reluctant GM. That's huge. I have a Pathfinder game that someone wants to run. And I'm pretty familiar with 2E, but there's still a lot that I don't feel like I'm good enough to do it yet. Even I have a lot of moments where I don't feel good enough to run a session, run a campaign, run a one shot. So they're actually going to run a couple sessions to play in. And we have a plan that when I'm comfortable enough, we're going to switch seats to give the person running the game an experience to be a member of the party. But then also they're giving me a circumstance to see how the game runs so that I can do it. I had never played Masks until within the last year. And I wanted to run a Masks game, but I had no idea how it worked. So I ended up being a party member of a Masks game. And then I got to be the GM. And even if I didn't have everything memorized, even if I didn't have all the ideas, the tone that I set ahead of time was I'm still learning the rules of this. I don't know everything, and there may be some stuff for those of you that have played more that I might rely on you for. But I'd love for us to have a great experience. Do you want this to be more of a rules heavy experience? If so, I'm going to rely on you for some of that. If you're okay with this being a little rules light and adding more as we go, I'm really excited to do this. And so you were saying being the one that's most being the one that's not comfy doing. Luckily, in my group of friends, I'm the only one uncomfy, so a lot of others get to DM, and the DMs actually get to play. That's also fan freaking tastic. I'm glad. When you have a rotation of people, you get different styles, you get different ideas, you get new experiences. And it's also okay that you're not comfortable doing it. There should never be guilt for not being a GM because it's a lot of work and sometimes a lot of unintentional pressure. It's scary having a world to give to people because then you don't know how they're going to interpret it. You don't know how they'll react to it. You don't know how much they'll enjoy the world that you are giving them, whether big or small. It's terrifying. And sometimes I'm very prepared for it. Sometimes I jump into it and I am walking on eggshells, terrified every second. Are they invested in this? Was that a good enough hit? Was that cute? Was that clever? Was that funny? Was that too funny? Was that not funny enough? Was there enough fight? Was that fight too short? Was that fight too easy? Was it too challenging? Did they not want to do that anymore? It's always it's questioning, was it good? Was it right? Was it enough? So if you are a member of a party running a game, excuse me, if you're a member of a party in a game and you also run games, you know how good the feeling is when you get validation being the like to the person who's running the game. So if you're a party member and the GM asks you how the session was and there was something you really liked that they did, tell them. It makes their day. It reassures concerns they might have had. And if you're the GM and your party compliments you, I get shy immediately. I think, well, it was kind of cool, I guess. It's all right. Yeah, don't look at me. I get shy very fast. It's because I process compliments like a small animal. That's still not bad. Yeah, yeah. Affirmation from your players. There's moments when, um, in the one shot I did recently for charity, I I had said that I wrote a few paragraphs of words, and then I ended up putting in a bard, and that I ended up singing. Like I improved a song and sang it, and internally, I'm like, oh no, oh no, I'm singing on camera in front of these people. Why am I doing this? This was a mistake. But afterwards, when actually it happened more than once. I because I did a performance in GoJG's game where I'm playing a dark matter robot lad on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Um, but I did something there. I when I was running a one shot, I sang a song, and then I didn't realize at first, and it was funny. Erica, because I was running a game for Erica Ishii and a few others, and she ended up putting it on her Instagram story. I ended up getting compliments, and I'm like, oh no, Tara, don't compliment me. Ah, shy, no, ah. But then internally, I'm like, this feels really nice. They liked my song. That was fun. I loved doing that. I'm glad my players appreciated it. I was worried that it wasn't gonna be cool. I was worried it wasn't gonna be great, but they liked it. They liked it. So when you get to hear those moments, even if you're shy about it at first, it's nice having affirmations from your party because then even if you don't feel like you're doing everything right, it's that moment of, I'm on the right track. And so, okay, one of you was saying you're trying to get your players to run some games slowly but surely. It's working. That's awesome. If they feel comfortable and it's slowly getting to that point, that's amazing. And even if they're not comfortable running the same game that you're doing, because you might be playing a system that has dozens of rules, a bunch of numbers, and a plethora of skills to manage. It's a lot. One of my favorite games that I've played, and I bring this up like once a week. And I'm so excited to GM this game. You have no idea. And I will rant about that another day. And we will probably have a day when we talk about making characters for this game because I like it a lot. But Tales from the Loop. Tales from the Loop was a game that when I sat down with the GM running it, Nomadic, I knew what I was doing with my character in the first hour. And that was a game that after character creation and the first session, I knew what I was doing. I knew I wanted to run it. There are a bunch of games that have an amazing assortment of rules that I cannot wrap my head around. And I love being a party member in those games. But being a GM for those games is so challenging to me. So if you're someone that wants to run games or you want to run more games, you don't have to run the games that you see all of these people play. It's okay to only want to be a party member in these games. And then when you find that one that you do want to run, amazing. Run with it, dive into it, because there will be people who want to play with you. There will be people who want to experience with you. There are people who want to tell these stories with you. There are people who want to delve into this system with you. There are so many systems that are the popular big name systems, and they work and people love them, and it's fantastic. There are also plenty of systems that are being made, don't get as much time of day, and it doesn't mean that they're not fun. It just means that they're for different types of people. I never knew about Tales from the Loop until Gnome invited me to play. And I talk about it all the time now. It was a system that from a GM standpoint I love. One of the notes in the system was that a rule is kids can't die and you play as kids. So the characters that your party is playing as cannot die. If I've said tone, context, and dynamic, and I keep coming back to them because they are the focuses of this conversation. If you set up in the first session that your players, all at the table, everyone knows that in the first session or this type of character cannot die, you set that tone, you set that understanding. It creates a whole different level of comfort. Because things can still go wrong, but it's one huge less thing to worry about. And I didn't realize how much setting that tone and that preface right in the first session zero removed so much concern and worry that I had. Ugh. Or like when you have a game that you might even know better than some of your party, or your party might know better than some of you. Having the dynamic of do you want this to be like heavily focused on following the rules? Do you want this to be focused on using rules as guidelines more and then referencing them when you want to, but not everything has to be what the pages say? Or do you want this to be you have these rules and you take from them, but you also have these ideas and you flex them in to how they come together? So, what is a game that you have been a member of the party of, or you've been a GM for, or even if it's a GM-less system, what is a game that made you think I want to play this with more people. I want to see other people playing this game. I've said myself that Tales from the Loop was absolutely one of those. I'd like to see more games that people play and are comfortable with sharing with each other. I want to see more people introducing other people to games. I don't want us to be caught in the cycle that is click rather than community. And I think part of the way that we get out of that is creating more GMs, is making people more comfortable to run games, is reminding people that when you're running a game, it's not about you being a perfect ideal. Because the way you play and the way you tell stories and the way you interact and the way you laugh and the way you have fun, that might be the perfect GM for the people that you have. It doesn't have to be perfect for everyone. And it doesn't have to be perfect for the people in front of you. But it might be. And to me, that's part of what's most exciting. There's a middle ground you have to find. And you absolutely can. So, where do you see yours? So, we've talked about context, tone, and dynamic in a lot of ways. And I also talked about how we are in a time when online games are so, so much in a surge. And it's fantastic because it gives us the opportunity to play with people all across the world. Time zones still aren't great, but we have those opportunities. So when you're playing online, it gives us new tools to use. You can always, yes, literally anyone could GM because there's different play styles for everyone. The burning wheel. So the beauty of online tools, when we have tables and you're sitting at the table and you want to tell a player a secret, you could be telling another player, like you could tell another party member a secret, you could tell the GM a secret, tell anyone a secret. But even when I was sitting in person, if I had a secret to tell, I would text it. I would text it, I would message it some sort of way. So, a prime example, because of where we're streaming, is Roll20. The whisper function is literally built into the system. And I whisper things all the time to my party members. All the time. But I also have a group document that I set up whenever I run a session, like for a campaign, for my party members to put their notes in. Hey, thank you, Mubot. And the reason I do this is because I want a dynamic where the secrets and the information is readily available and shared. I want, as things are written down, it doesn't have to be just on one player to recall stuff. It's fantastic when one of the players, whether it's the GM or the party, is writing down and noting information to reference later. But if you have, like, for example, a Google Doc, if you have literally an open notepad inside of Roll20, because you can make them and make shared documents that any player can edit if they want to, which is fantastic. And we'll go into more another day. for setting it up your games inside of Roll20. If you have that shared document that anyone can go through to get information, then people can just look up and see, oh, actually, this person was there, because no one else might have thought to look at it. No one else might have thought to recall that. No one else might have thought that it was important information you had to go back to. And as a GM, I forget things all the time. So when a party member has notes in their character sheet, they have a character journal that they write the notes down in, it makes my life 12 times easier. I could have said 10, but I had to give that extra 2 because I'm over the top. Um, it makes my life easier because if I'm like, what did that player's backstory involve, actually? And then I literally just go and look.